Yeah, yeah. Right. And this may not be the, the appropriate thing, like holding somebody's hand in your work environment, but right, this is one of the things that sometimes, you need to do, or at least the being on the same level, or the facing each other, right? What about here? They're not facing each other. Not really. I mean, they're looking down. Where do you see co-regulation? Yeah. So parallel activities, shared activities. So children parallel play early on, right? And it's because they're like kind of feeling, they're learning from each other. They're just not looking at each other. And we still do that.
Also, like, one of the things about taking this denies,
Right, there's like learning, I can assume some like learning and skill building is happening.
I mean, when I try to learn how to use it correctly, it feels like I'm taking
Yeah. And in a supportive environment, right?
Intergenerational too.
Yeah.
And then maybe some shared purpose.
Shared purpose, yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah.
It's like there's joy.
Right, just like and there's not like roll out laughing. There's just like some peace and joy in there. Okay, how about here?
Empathetic listening.
Sure.
Seems like a casual setting, like in between work.
Mm-hmm.
Holding space.
Uh-huh.
What did you say?
Holding space.
Holding space. Yeah, like she's just, you could tell she's listening without saying anything. Right. Yeah, so these are, things that we really, really depend on kind of in our day-to-day lives. And this is kind of the starting point, right? And, things like tone of voice and even like how someone said how you breathe. Like these are all the things that just sort of set that table for what comes next, what the interactions you have. So we start with kind of course, like our own regulation. And think about, does your own body feel mobilized? Do you feel empowered, right? Does your body feel energized? When you walked in today, did you feel activated in a positive, empowered way? Do you feel capable? Do you feel connected? And then, what is it that you need to be open and present? Because when we're not open and present, we go into our default safety mode. I think about this, I have this memory of being at a conference, or it was a summit. It was actually a summit on inclusivity with people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And we spent all morning having great conversation, presentations with people with developmental disabilities, just talking a lot about how important inclusivity in the nutrition space is. And, just felt, heard the voices of all these folks with lived experience. And then we broke for lunch. And everyone went down to lunch and sat with the people they knew. And all the people who had presented from the disability community were sitting by themselves because we kind of forgot to regulate when we left the room and say, I have to still be in group and meet with people who I may not be comfortable with naturally, right? And so taking that intentional step of like, where are you? Do I feel connected? Is this first step to bridging these gaps we might end up just inadvertently having with each other, right? And we've all done it. We all did it here to sit down with, and that's fine. We do want to sit with people like us, but that extra effort to break those silos, to break apart from the people and the ways of doing things that we're familiar with, takes this step. So we'll take a quiet reflection. A really quick one? Yeah, I guess we just did that yeah, we did start late, yeah. And so think about this for the next time, when you have to go into some meeting like this or another, strategy session. And think about, what we're going to move into, kind of what now allows people to engage, what allows the community to engage and to feel like they're capable. Safety and trust, again, and dignity are the starting point, but what is it that is going to let people now go from, okay, safety and trust will get them off of the red light, what's going to get them to go into the green? And that's where we're going to go with this today.
Yeah, I think we'll skip this so we have more time for the activity, because I think we started like 2 minutes late. Okay, so that is the setup, right? Is that we have these internal processes happening that are really critical to moving people to action, not just to safety. Everybody clear on that, right? So what are the implications of that to how we design and implement our social services? And I can go fast here because our 2 speakers this morning did a really fantastic job from Human Services Agency and the chef of kind of setting this up for us, right? So Susie talked a lot about things in HSA that were improving, right? A new building, we're trying to make this more approachable, safer, less stigma, all these kinds of things, right? So I think we have a really good sense of, okay, we're pretty good at thinking about shame and stigma and how to take it out of programs. I think that's a place we're pretty much there in San Francisco, right, with understanding that. But getting to action, like Monica was talking about, that might be a place where we can explore some strategies for how do we think about this at the system level, right? And so I think you shared, okay, think about the systems approach, right? That was your group agreement that you wanted to bring up. And so that's what I want to talk about is how do we think about this as an infrastructure issue, not just as an individual mandate to do what Monica's asked us to do, right? So we understand our human wiring and we can say, okay, I need to walk into that conference or I need to walk into this food distribution or walk into this environment and I personally need to be regulated in order for this to happen. But that puts a lot of stress on the individual, right, to do this. So we know our social services response is good at this stuff. We've got Maggie was just saying, oh, we're doing a trauma-informed customer service training at D10, right? Like we do what we need to do to get rid of some of the shame and stigma and make safe environments. If you're thinking about charitable food, we can think about all these different ways over the years that we have embedded choice, voice, and dignity into the system. That doesn't mean the system itself is empowering, but it does mean that it's not doing the same kind of harm it may have been doing prior to all these, the past 15 years when all this has really taken root in the charitable food system. Let's talk quickly about power. Are you all familiar with these 4 types of power? This is kind of a common social justice frame for talking about power. So power over is sort of this sort of colonialist concept, right? And then the power with, I think this collective power that we understand, certainly coalition people understand it. Monica talked about capacity, competence, power to, what am I able to do as an individual? And then we have this power within, which is I think what she was getting at when we're talking about this innate need that we have to act on our own behalf and to really make our own stand in the world, right? And that requires self-esteem, right? We have to believe that we are worthy of that power in order to use it, right? So that's where we see the internalization of shame really gets in the way of our power. So if I'm thinking charitable food, I might say, who decides what food to provide? Well, that answer can be reflective of power in the system. So If the agency or funder is deciding, oh, that's a senior food box, it comes down from the USDA, here, enjoy it. You know, there's no choice. Versus, oh, this is a choice set up pantry distribution where you can go in and do things. That's a more power with. Oh, we heard from the clients that I live in San Diego. We have a lot of really diverse groups of immigrants and refugees in San Diego. And so the food pantries are reflective of that. I mean, they're just totally different depending on what neighborhood you go into. But then you might say, okay, yeah, so in that case, maybe agencies and participants co-developed some desired food options, right? We don't eat peanut butter, so you can leave that out, you know. Then you have this competency, this power to issue, right? Thanks for that. You know, my very first contract in 2007 with the SF Marin Food Bank was around butternut squash being found in the dumpsters behind senior housing. Here's fresh produce. I live in an SRO, I don't have a knife, and I'm really one person, and that's a really big squash, right? What about, you know, this is this systemic issue that Monica was talking about, right? Like, it's like, this system was not built for me. Like, I cannot act within this system. This is not matching, you know, what I need. Getting people to think like, I am able to get the kind of food I need within this broader system. And we're gonna talk about what happens when charitable food does not play well with broader economic systems, right? That's one of the scenarios that we're gonna play around with in a few minutes. So we see power and we think like, okay, in order to get to power within, what kind of infrastructure needs to be embedded in our social services delivery system? Because it can't just be one that prioritizes safety. It can't just be erasing shame and stigma. Like, that's not enough to get to where we want to go. So let's talk about two things here before we go into small groups. One is technology. Technology has been embedded into the social service system, I think, in some cases in some pretty good ways over the past 10 years. Right, so can you think of an example of how technology has improved the client experience in something happening in San Francisco? Anybody have an example of what they can get?
Cards instead of paper.
Sure, and electronic WIC also, right? SF Marin Food Locator, right? Easy to find. You don't have to get on the phone, right? You can go online and figure it out.
We do our referrals digitally, which makes it faster and safer.
Yeah.
My chart had access to labs in your meds, though pro and con, because use of technology in older population and telling them to download an app. And my chart in general, even for me, is a little challenging to use.
Yeah, but I agree with you. You know, my kids need their immunization records, and I like being able to just go onto my chart and download it and not have to find time in the middle of my workday to call the nurse and ask them to, I don't know, fax it to me or whatever, you know, whatever used to happen. So let's just a little more granular. So how do these technology overlays decrease shame and stigma? Like what's an example of how that technology not only makes things easier, but makes things sort of safer?
They could do it on their own time. They don't need to ask someone physically to help them go somewhere.
It feels more power to do something than power over, right? Like this particular person has power over the information I want. I now have the power with this technology to get the information that I need, right? Any other examples you can think of that really help to decrease like shame and stigma?
Speaking to like the WIC cards,
Yeah.
over vouchers, like it's a card that you can swipe, so it offers you that additional like privacy while you're in public, the stigma around using
Yeah.
food benefits.
Right, as long as you know your balance.
Yeah.
And your PIN.
In your bank. Exactly, but it's true, right? Then you've got a card like anybody else versus you're obviously pulling checks out. Oh, WIC check at aisle 3, you know, which happens, right? Which happens. Okay, so yeah, so technology win, get CalFresh, right? So that was a big difference from the benefits CalWin system and all these old systems that were incredibly wonky, right? This was a skin, over helped, right? Okay, anyone watch The Pit?
Yeah. That's like,
Okay, this season, are you watching it?
yeah.
You're behind. Well, this isn't a giveaway to anything. Okay, so The Kid is a show. I didn't watch the first season, but my husband talked about it a lot, so I said I'd watch this one. It's a show. It's kind of like the old Kiefer Sutherland 24. It's like 1 hour in a ER over the course of dates me. And there's a scene in this. It's in an emergency room, a busy emergency room. There's a woman who's deaf, and it is this really cringy, awkward scene with a digital, like an ASL interpreter that's like a machine that they bring in. TTY. Okay, it is the most awkward scene to watch because the doctor does not know who to look at, right? So Monica's talking about how do you co-regulate, right? It was such a good example of like lack of co-regulation because you have this digital intermediary that is supposed to be creating a shared communication, a shared language, but it's broken, it's hard to get, it doesn't really work, and so it does damage, right? Because this physician walks in, she's trying to give care to a deaf patient. She doesn't know if she's looking at the screen, the woman, or the nice nurse who just happens to speak like 17 languages and seems to be able to just be this like Band-Aid in the ER. And eventually, the doctor just looks at the nurse and says something and leaves, does not acknowledge the patient on the bed. And you just feel, like you feel in your wiring, like, oh my gosh, that was a damaging situation. And then so I went into a little bit of a rabbit hole on this. But these people on Reddit, this is a Coda and his mother, so a child of deaf adult and his mother, and they're talking about a very similar experience that they had in the emergency room with one of these machines as kind of like a reaction to the PID thing. But when I watched it, I was like, what would Monica say about this, right? Like, because you could see it in action, right? And you may have seen experiences like this in your own social services, especially around, it's really obvious when it's around interpretation or language, right? Where you're like, there's just something here that is like not working and you can kind of feel it in your body, right? And I think for an external person to feel it, it has to be really bad, but then you think, what are all these, you know, the word microaggression, right? Or these like sort of micro times where your wiring is just really pushing up against something that is not human. Right? So this isn't like, I mean, technology is an infrastructure that is being put on top of our social services sector. And a lot of times it is creating more efficiency. It is creating helpful things, right? But that's not always it, right? That's not going to solve it. And sometimes I think that's how technology is sold to us. Like, oh, all you need is better technology. All you need is more efficiency. And you're like, okay, I get it. Like, technology is cool. I like it. I took a Waymo here this morning. Videoed the whole thing for my kids. So I'm trying, you know. But it's not sufficient. So then what are we left with, right? We have this, you know, AI situation now too. We've got this concept of like a hybrid intelligence that's essentially powering social services, where we have this human experience, we have this technology that's kind of divorced from human. So we're in this really hybrid space where we're trying to understand what is the role of artificial intelligence in our lives right now, right? I mean, it's destabilizing. Even if we can see the benefits, right? It's still really destabilizing. I read this term, and there's a references at the end of this slide from some of this information abundance, but relational strain. How many of you can resonate? I was like, that's a great phrase, right? Like, that's how I feel. I don't feel that I'm information starved. I feel that I'm relationally starved because I don't understand how this information relates to me or to my community. I don't really know how to use it, but gosh, there's a lot of it. You know, I went down a whole separate tangent yesterday about like basically how I think AI is eating itself and it's getting worse and worse, which I won't drag you down that, but if you sat at my lunch table, you probably heard me rant. So how do we support this ability to act then? Like, what do we do, you know, as planners? we've got a bunch of women in this, a lot of women in this field, and we're supposed to be like, you know, it's very gendered because no one thinks about this, because in my opinion, people just think, well, women are going to do it better because that's what we're good at. It doesn't have to be built into the infrastructure. And I don't think that's true, right? I think we have really high rates of burnout. I think everybody's freaking exhausted all the time. We have a ton of vicarious trauma. We have a ton of compassion fatigue. Everybody's worn out. So there's not enough infrastructure to support the kind of relationships that we want to have that help people become actors in their own life. And then we ourselves as service providers are shamed all the time for not providing enough safety. And it's like safety, you can never get enough safety. You have to be safe enough to act, and then that becomes your buffering against safety, right? Your ability to engage is part of the resilience, as Monica said, against the threat. We as a social services sector cannot reduce the threat to zero. But that's kind of what we're asked to do. But it's not like humanly possible. What's more realistic is that we can reduce the threat enough to let people's resilience come through. Right, so threat goes down into that window of tolerance, but what is pushing up that action? What is pushing up people's abilities to take charge of their own lives? Right? If we focus too much on safety, we tamp that down too. So that interplay, there's an interdependence between safety and ability to act. That is difficult to negotiate with technology, and it's difficult to negotiate just with efficient service delivery. Because the focus is what? On the service delivery, not on the people. So we can think about this concept of relational intelligence, right? Which is not emotional intelligence. I'm not talking about emotional intelligence, love emotional intelligence, that's just not what we're talking about here. Emotional intelligence is your own ability to regulate yourself. Monica just talked about emotional intelligence of like you have to be regulated before you can walk into these communities. But what I'm saying from a system level is that we need something more like relational intelligence, right? This human ability to build trust, navigate differences, repair relationships, create shared meaning. It emphasizes connection, empathy, collaboration, emotional attunement, which are essential for human flourishing, especially in the face of technology-enabled interactions and resources, right? So what does this look like as a system? I just want to say that one more time. It's different than emotional intelligence. Okay, so we can think about these three overlapping infrastructures, right? We have our service delivery infrastructure, which we've optimized. Then we have this technology infrastructure, which is being sold to us as another layer of optimization and connection and all that kind of stuff. And I think we can agree it does well in some things and it does poorly in others. Then let's talk about a relational infrastructure that really needs to be built on top of this in order for us to not only meet our needs for safety and trustworthiness and transparency, but also all this stuff on the bottom. Right? Social and historical contextualization, AI is terrible at that. Right? It does not look at information and put it into historical context. As my lunch table knows, it could not tell me the Padres lineup for today. The game starts in 1 minute. I'm a Padres fan. Opening day. It's gonna be tough. And so when we're thinking about storytelling and community or understanding the relationship between an organization and that organization's history in a community, that is not information that lives on the internet. That is not information and context that is easily shared and embedded into your EHR, right? Like, oh, you're from the Bayview, and I'm giving you a referral for this service provider. My EHR is not going to say, you know, that service provider has kind of a sketchy history in that neighborhood of inefficient funding, and they've been in and out, and this person might not really want to go to that referral because that's never, it's too much of an ask. So what is the relational infrastructure that is embedded in how we train our staff and how we train ourselves, and the type of information that we ourselves as providers feel, oh, I have an ability to act in this situation because I know more than the sophisticated technology. Because I have invested in this community in a way. Do we feel confident to go up against AI? It's like, well, I don't know, that's what the digital referral thing said. Like, it's right, because it's technology, because it's divorced from us, right? So this is what I'm talking about, right? It's mitigating what technology can do, what technology can't do, and how do we as individuals feel powerful enough that our own intuition, our own experience, our own ability to co-regulate is valued as information within the system. In a systemic way, right? Not just like, oh, that's the best teacher at the school. Definitely get, Miss Jones for 7th grade. Everybody else is terrible. That's not relational infrastructure, right? That's a lot of burden on Miss Jones. So, safe service delivery not sufficient to support traumatized mobilization situations. Relational intelligence cannot be viewed only as an individual skill or talent. Recognition of power dynamics has to happen at the system level. And technology can have its own power dynamic. So what are the systems and tools that do strengthen our human connection to expand people's sense of belonging and collective capacity? What are they, and how do we build them intentionally into our systems? Because that sense of belonging and collective capacity is what we know we need from our wiring in order to act, right? That middle part, right? That adolescent part. We get safe, we get collaborative, and then we feel powerful. So without that feeling of belonging and collaboration and value, we can't get to the power part. You can't skip that. Information and safety is not enough. You have to feel that you are a part of the community that you live in a very deep way. So some suggestions. Think about how we architect time and space. How are our governance and policy, right? How are decisions made? I'm a big governance nerd, right? And decision making, participatory processes, all the stuff that you guys inevitably have been well trained on. And then what does shared meaning and emotional support look like for our workforce at a system level, right? Some things that came up for me as I was researching this concept of relational infrastructure. This is something that can be measured. And this is not even that new. This relational coordination scale, this is like 2006, 2007. There's some 20-year-old tools that are simply not used, but are like evidence-based tools for looking at trust and connection and all these things Monica was talking about, right? What you measure, you pay attention to. And so things like that can be adopted at a system level to track, like how well are we doing at these measures, right? We can also look at technology procurement. Like, okay, I'm interested in that technology as long as the time saved is going to be used for better delivery, rather than now you can see 17 patients a day instead of 14. Right? Wow, now you have your 14 patients, I'm giving you 5 minutes extra with every patient. That's a big difference in healthcare. Right? How do we write technology RFPs to build in relational infrastructure, not just efficiency? Thinking about the human interaction, not just the service delivery. So if you're thinking about charitable food, start tracking not just pounds delivered or even quality of food delivered, right? Which was like first it's like, well, we don't just want to look at pounds per person in poverty. We want to look at like quality metrics also. And then it's like, okay, well, how do we actually measure the experience of people within the system and track that? And then of course there's education. All right, you got to tell funders. They don't know. I just think a lot of times the sell for a technology is that it saves time. And then how is that saved time spent? And is it spent to improve the, like, is it spent in a way that speeds things up? Or is it spent in a way that makes things better? And how do we make things better? What are we measuring? Right? And I'll skip that slide for now. So I think just like we're gonna, now go into sort of our scenario work, but just thinking through like how can relational intelligence counterbalance this artificial hybrid intelligence? Just thinking like sort of to bring with you, and how does it, really support this two-way relational needs of providers and clients? Providers have the same human wiring needs as clients do. Exactly the same, it's the same, right? Nervous system, we're just a bunch of nervous systems hanging out in a room. And then how can relational infrastructure support those, provider-client and provider-provider relationships, right? There's a lot of tension in nonprofits between people that work in the nonprofits. Everybody's under stress, and our focus is serve the clients, and it can be really hard. So I've got two scenarios for you. I'm going to give each table one to look at. And these are true stories that have been anonymized. These are actual things that happen. So there's a brief scenario and then some questions. So take about 10 minutes. Talk about the questions, and then I want to hear what each group has to say. So you guys are going to present your scenario and present your thoughts. Okay. assumption. I think sometimes it's like, oh, we have to provide every single bit of calories through the charitable food network, and I don't think that the data actually supports that. I think the data supports that it's a proportion of the total food. But we don't spend a lot of time, like the soda companies do, making relationships with everybody.
Well, just considering everyone who's involved in the system that you're impacting, right?
Yeah.
Rather than the top down, I have a great solution, I'm going to impose it on you, which is often the charitable model.
Or just like the needy person, or the needy part of the community.
Right. Yeah, which only talks about the need, not the person.
Right, exactly.
And the question is, do people want to be separate from the system that the rest of the city is participating in? Or are we just create parallel,
Yeah.
segregation, segregation?
Yeah, how does that influence your sense of belonging in your community? It's the assumption is you can't take advantage of most of it. You have a separate.
That's why I love the vouchers, because that's what the
Yeah.
last question I thought about. Like, the vouchers help the business, and it doesn't disrupt the way people already do things.
Right. It's more integrated. So what about you all? What was your story?
There's some vouchers over here. I know there's some vouchers over there.
So our scenario was a summer lunch program for preschoolers that was being held at a preschool. Oftentimes parents had to sit outside of the preschool while their children ate, which the preschool decided to kind of allow them inside, offer them food. However, they had to eat on tiny preschool chairs and eat tiny preschool portions of food out of little cups, and
Been there.
the federal regulations around the program didn't allow them to take food home. And so we kind of had to go through and figure out how do we make this better for everybody as a whole.
Yeah, some of the things that we discussed was like mutual aid, and we also, when we talked about, I think Rand mentioned, there's likely adults that are teachers at the preschool, so we know there's going to be some sort of like chairs for maybe having those like very real, clear, maybe even the full conversations, like with knowing kind of what the situation is. Maybe the funding doesn't allow for adult portion sizes of food to be given to the adults, and so maybe with that understanding, knowing that it is important for the parents to share space with the children, and finding ways to get more food, whether it's the parents themselves bringing in that food.
Yeah, I mean, like that's not a normal nonprofit solution model. Is like that mutual aid or participatory, right? We don't want to ask anybody for anything. We want this to be super low barrier, super easy, right? Prioritizing safety over ability to act. And what you're saying is like, let's invite parents in and let them act within this system, not robbing them of their ability to act.
Yeah, some reciprocity.
Some reciprocity.
People like to give.
Yeah,
as
but
well
like
as
most
receive.
nonprofits don't think about that. It's all about like barrier reduction, frictionless, let's make this easy. And our nervous system doesn't necessarily always want to be disempowered, right?
I have a devil's advocate proposition, which is if the fundamental problem is presented, parents don't seem interested in the activities. I think it's really important to ask them if they even want this. As a parent, when I had a 3-4-year-old, all I wanted in the world was to give that child to somebody else to deal with for a couple hours. But this meal program probably, like, it's probably half an hour. Maybe this was 45 minutes. There might be some parents that would say, is there any way you could make this 2 hours so that I can go to the grocery store? And so I think asking first if even coming in is something they want. And you probably get it. I mean, the problem then is once you ask a question, you're seeding the suggestion that you're going to do something about it. And so you ask, do you even want to come in? Do you want a 2-hour program? What do you want? You know, I think we see this in community a lot. We're surveying people constantly about what they want. And then, like, guess what? We're going to keep
different things.
We don't have the resources for that, sorry, we asked, but we're gonna ask you again, you know, so there is a fundamental problem in asking people what they want.
Well, not really, but I think it is about, like, there is a fundamental problem unless you really lean into a well-governed participatory process, right? Which is where we get into this, like, relational infrastructure piece, and not just relying on somebody's sensibility to go to community, right? Because there's a difference between wanting to go to community and knowing how to go to community, and understanding, oh, these are the processes that actually work. This is how you negotiate different kinds of feedback. This is how you talk about levels of community engagement and where community has the power to shape or control decisions, right? But so when I'm always thinking about from an infrastructure standpoint, it's like, well, you have to teach and align with participatory processes and teach everybody how to do them. Otherwise, yeah, it is just like, well, Ellen has a great idea, go to community. Ellen, you want to go make a survey? Ellen, you want to go ask everybody? Ellen, why don't you come next week with some suggestions? That's not infrastructure, right?
And then Ellen, why don't you write the grants?
Yeah,
And
right.
then she's gonna go back to her neighborhood and explain to her neighbors that nothing happened.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And are you ever gonna want to tell? Right.
Yeah, that doesn't motivate me.
That's why it needs to be. Right, I know we're supposed to be done. I think we have a break now, right? And we're supposed to be upstairs until 3. I think it's 3.
So closing.
No, the grocery giveaway happens.
I think that's after. That's after.
Is that
So, I mean, I guess
Closing remarks.
was this like some helpful?
grocery giveaway?
Very helpful.
Good.
I think I really appreciate having a word for relational infrastructure and relational intelligence.
Yeah.
Because I feel like a lot of my job is like building that relational intelligence and connecting things to the right recipient because I know things about them and like their food needs. And there's a lot of talk about like creating more efficiencies within our fleets and how we deliver food. And I'm like, but they don't want that food or like they can't use that. Like, so a lot of the times I'm like, you can try and make the gas mileage shorter or the mileage shorter, but like ultimately it's not going to do anything.
I mean, I felt the same way as you when I was reading about this concept. I was like,
Yeah.
so I
And it's legitimate.
and it's a real
You're
word.
funny with the tool. You're like, I know how to measure it.
So exciting.
So thank you for saying that, because that's why I wanted to bring this topic to this group.
Yeah.
Because I felt that we all have a sense, because it is part of our wiring to be relational, right? Yeah. So, anyway, thanks everyone.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
That's great. Really good.
Why is it so easy to in some settings and others not at all?
What's the difference between the settings?
I do immediately go,
It's usually people, but people within settings. Well, the healthcare settings are challenging for me, much more challenging. For nonprofits, and so, you know,
I think the healthcare settings are a special.
well, it's all about efficiencies. It's not about relationships.
And the decision makers in nonprofits, you can identify. Right?
Yes.
Like within a nonprofit structure, you may not be the decision maker, but you kind of know who is, right?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a funder decision. Oh, that's my ED, right? It seems to be more transparent about decision making. And what I find frustrates me about healthcare, which I feel the same way as you, is that I'm not clear what the structure is. I don't understand how decisions are made. I don't really understand how decisions are made when you think about an MCP versus a healthcare setting.
Yeah.
There's a lot of passing the buck around accountability. And if you're somebody that's trying to get something done, you're like, I need to understand. Like,
Well, then you layer city, county government on top of it.
well, yeah.
So we're
I mean,
working in public health.
right. There's so many overlapping,
It's even worse.
overlapping
There's
systems.
politics too, plus all of the legal.
I
It's
think
really
it's hard
It's like-
for your nervous system to regulate in a system that it's like what, I don't understand how to work in this system as a professional, and it's distracting. And so then it's hard for you to be in a place where you're regulated enough to really make authentic relationships. Because I find that even during a conversation, I'm so distracted by what I don't understand or a system that is hard to navigate that it's not the same as when I can just kind of relax into a conversation. I don't know.
But with certain people and even certain teams, it's great. Like, you know, and then other certain people and other certain teams, it's not great. And it's been really, I mean, I've been in this work for 35 years. It's been some of the most challenging work I've ever had. And I'm not, you know, not 100% navigating it as well as I want to, you know?
Yeah.
And it's just interesting. It's just why certain people are just so much easier for me.
Well, Monica and I wanted to have, like, we sort of, like, probably needed 2 full hours for this training.
Yeah, yeah.
Start 15 minutes later, but we were talking about, like, as we're planning the meeting, can we ask
Approach, like, kind of not the polish.
and did they, like,
Network
sit
demo,
with
and
somebody?
just like,
Or sit with somebody else, because you do, you know, you go in a room, you're yellow, right? You're like, okay, safe enough for me to walk in this room.
Scanning.
I'm gonna scan, oh, I love her.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go sit with her. She's gonna make me feel better. Right? I haven't seen her for ever.
Yeah.
Right? And then like, oh,
That person. I was dreading coming to the conference just because I was just like, but then I came and I'm like, oh, it's better than scene and I'm like, what was I worried about? I don't know.
Well,
Just
we're
a lot
driven-
of
the work
people.
is driven
It was
by
just
relationships.
a lot of people. The work is driven by relationships.
Yeah.
I keep trying to, I don't know, model that or something. I mean, there is, like, I'm having a conflict with someone and I know exactly why. But I can't get to the point where I can, like, calm the nervous system, so I'm very avoid.
Well, until the common nervous system stand up something.
I don't know if it's ever gonna be that way with this person.
yeah, it's very hard.
So is that okay too? I mean, it's not about like kumbaya, we all get along 24/7, right? I mean, isn't that part of the relational thing? It's like,
Yeah, I mean,
there are difficulties, there are challenges, it's not 100%,
well,
right?
you have shut down your ability to kind of like feel like the juice is worth the squeeze, you know, kind of thing. And like,
It's not what this
maybe it's like,
the juice
juice
is definitely not
I think that might be the first time I've used that phrase,
I
but
love
it makes really sense.
that. No, that's pretty much what I said.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
exactly what I said.
Yes.
Yeah, this effort to repair is a complete waste of time.
Yeah.
And I'm exhausted, like she said. And I have lots of other things going on. Our system is, we're all, I mean, it's insanity, right? And I don't have, I just don't have that resource.
Yes.
And that's okay,
and
right?
Until you do,
Yeah.
you can't force yourself to have something, fascinating.
Yeah. Because I really appreciate it was very deep what you guys presented. That was not a shallow
No.
thing. I'm going to
That's
probably
what
be
we do.
thinking about these
We can
concepts
talk
for a
later.
minute, but yeah. But it's challenging because our world really does not reinforce or support or reward a relational approach. And yet, it functions 100% on relationships. Because it's the white male, network, that's what that is.
Yeah.
Right?
They just made it work
In their favor, right? So we have to make it work in our favor with our relations.
I think at very least, it gives you a framework and language for when something is not working,
Yeah.
when it just it fell apart, or it didn't kind of, the vision did not meet the reality.
Yeah, I don't know, it's helpful. I mean, even we're changing a program at a clinic that's been in operation in one form or another since 2018. And people are like, well, even if I don't get the food, can I still come and just hang out? I'm like, yes. Of course, some of the other people are like, well, they're there, the official role, and what if they take food when they're not? And I'm like, it's fine.
I mean, it's,
it's
it's not caviar.
Right, exactly. Well, and also
Steaks.
people were respect other people because they're part of a community.
Yeah.
And somebody
That's
else
what they're
will keep
saying.
them in mind if they're doing something they're not supposed to. I don't need to be their babysitter.
It's all there.
Grown-ass adults, okay? Like.
That speaks really well of what was created there, that people want to come and high,
know.
that's success.
That is success.
Well, I mean, and it goes back
breaks my
to
heart. We have to
people
change them all, but we do have to change them all.
don't want to feel like they're just there to be given to.
Exactly.
Right.
It's not a transaction.
It's not a transaction.
We've been saying it's
Relational.
not. And so
You have to
it
make it,
is.
you have to make it non-transaction.
And given history in the neighborhood and healthcare and all this stuff, like, yeah. Because that's what it's been. It's been a transaction. We'll see if we can do that. I hope so. I'm not in charge.
There you go.
Even if I were, I
Thank you, Monica. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for being here.
I'm hoping we can, I'm gonna talk to Zoe about,
About,
doing a training for our staff and for our RDs.
yeah. Yeah, it's a good one for that kind of school.
Group, right? Yeah. We just got some news that we got some funding, so. Because we did a lot of technical assistance training last year, or I guess it's this fiscal year. But we didn't really have any budget for next year yet, so because we have the money, but I think it's different from where you're
So this is one of my
well, so we do the food pharmacies are groups, and the RDs are doing vegetation. But they also, in their regular practice, have information. So I can imagine that even some, just some of the things that they could do. I mean, I totally project this going to the doctor.
Yeah, you don't have that discussion.
Right. I have totally like this syndrome, I have all the things, but, so, I mean, I just really believe that technicians hesitant to show up, to, participate. I completely understand that. Message and folks knowing that, we're trying to build a bridge, relationship, as opposed to just, and you get
I love getting just like a wide range of people.
I don't know, it's great.
It's been a good conversation. Yes, it's been great. It's my first one. Yeah?
And just gelling social services, people are getting everything bad, there's just, which is understandable.
Yeah, it's great. I love it. I just really respect that there is a space where we can get, because the thing is, like, I'm very new to working in like food access, but like I've been with food for 1 year. So I don't know a whole more of like the failed attempts or the successful attempts and things like that. So I'm sort of getting the lay of the land. That being said, there's so many food access things that I didn't know about.
I know, we started one here.
Yeah. We need, yeah.
Is it 8531 or 8521? Because yesterday you said 3.
It was actually on the right way. And then counting down.
Oh, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, that's too long.
Just like this.
Okay, so it doesn't really matter. I like the last one.
What is it?
Yeah, get it down to the 2, the 1.
My role? Yeah. I'm running into some.
Okay, I'm gonna go up, I'll do their evaluation forms since I'm an evaluator.
But I do a lot of training, consulting. I mean, I'm very focused.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
But yeah, for the past 20 years.
Yes.
I met her. Now I do like
She was on I'm in school, kind of. I take one class at City College, and Ellen spoke, like on our.
I like the program. I'm not telling you that it's
the incredible time in San Francisco.
yes,
Oh, I know.
people are.
They are.
I need it. No, I'm not. That's like saying, I like to be in communities. We could chat with random people all the time. I only bring when I'm professional. but
Totally.
talking to funders in bullshit ways is not,
I know, it's like
I
you have
have
to,
to play.
you do have to play the game.
oh God, I know. No, I had some experiences early in my career, actually, with food bank ED at San Diego, where I realized, like, yeah, that's not my, as I spoke plainly to one of her funders.